obviously those tuning in probably know it's been a little weird the last couple of years with the macroeconomic climate and especially for our industry. Um, so I think there's a lot. I mean, you haven't been in an operating role in the last couple of years, so you kind of dodged a bullet there. Um, but I can definitely reflect on some of the recent, let's say like late 2011, 2011, 21, early 22, when the venture market just basically completely bottomed out. The ATM was closed.
Mhm.
Nobody knew when interest rates would come back down again, if they ever would come back down to anywhere close to the super duper low rates that they were. And so like the name of the game for venture backed companies, for growth valuated companies, went from grow at all costs to like survive at all costs, like literally overnight. Like I remember that moment when everyone was like, wait, so the next funding round isn't a given anymore? You know what I mean? Like it used to be like you had to really fail to not raise that next round because you could always like deploy capital in a way that forced success. And all of a sudden it was like, not only, especially if your customers happen to be other tech companies, your market bottomed out and your ability to raise more capital to drive more, you know, let's just call it like fake growth, just
Fake
kind of
growth.
disappeared. I mean, let's be honest, a lot of our industry,
We force growth. Sure.
yeah, yeah, I'm a fake force, same difference. But yeah, it's just, and I think there was like this generation of product people, product leaders, product managers, ICs, who had never seen anything else than the grow at all costs, just when in doubt, hire more people, when in doubt, build, 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 build. And so all of a sudden you find yourself in this environment where like, especially if you were venture funded, which still meant the name of the game had to be growth, but now you had to also think of like survival. And so to get to specifics, I joined Workstep right at that moment. Like it was so funny. Like as I was interviewing, the sky was still blue and the sun was shining. And when I joined, the clouds had gathered. And Workstep had really, I want to say, luckily, but maybe also due to the brilliance of the board and the founders, raised a beefy round just before the faucet turned off. And so then I find myself as a leader in a company where we've talked about the pivot of the company from like its original product to its secondary product, which was painful in and of itself. Um, but doing so in an environment where like runway management was incredibly critical.
Mm-hmm.
And and also of course like the downside of the lucky strike of having raised a meaningful round just before the faucets turned off, that round was still at a revenue multiple aligned with the previous times. And now all of a sudden you're thinking about runway management and raising a subsequent round at some point based on significantly compressed revenue multiples.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah. No one wants a down round.
yeah, that's again like it's even though I think the attitudes have like relaxed a little bit, like everybody knows the name of the game right now, like
Mhm.
flat rounds and down rounds are a little more acceptable right now because everybody knows it's like, okay, that previous investment during the zero interest rate policy times wasn't realistic.
Mhm.
But so anyway, like the long story short, like I definitely got like a master class in like crisis management because like we were lucky in that our target customer wasn't a particularly um eh, volatile. Like we were selling to companies who barely even noticed an upswing or a downswing. Like our customers weren't tech companies who were trying to sell to other tech companies, and so that helped. So our market didn't disappear, but just our approach to spending, our approach to scaling the team, scaling the product had to get very pragmatic, which was something that I had never as an executive experience. I had, I've gone through the Great Recession and even the dot-com boom and bust as like an IC and like a manager. But yeah, that was a ride.
What was a specific challenge or difficulty that your team had, and how did you get the team through it?
Yeah, I mean the biggest thing that you immediately notice is just learning to deal with scarcity.
Uh-huh.
Because you know how like in the up times it was always like, oh, we should really need more like data analysis, hire more data team, or
Hmm.
like, you know, you're gonna smirk at this, but like build a product ops function. You know what I mean? I say that as a person who absolutely loves product ops as a
Sure.
thing, but like it, there was really like the line of sight on the value of an employee had
Yeah.
to be like the aperture was as narrow as possible.
Yep.
And so putting in bets on these kind of semi-speculative multiplier roles, for example, just didn't happen. So it was more like everybody had to do like 10 different jobs. If you were a product manager, you're also a data analyst and you're also a product ops person, you're also this and that. So like teaching people, especially people who are like mid seniority, who had lived and worked through a lot of the happy-go-lucky days of cheap capital,
Yeah.
teaching them to approach this new, leaner, more scarcity-driven environment was a big leadership challenge. And it's again,
Hmm.
I think a lot of it, like your ability to be successful, boils down to like transparency and kind of financial education of people who normally wouldn't necessarily be exposed to finances. So whether it's like helping them understand like what's the connection of the macroeconomic circumstance to
Yeah.
kind of their own financial upside on their, equity incentives, and also the impact to the company's finances on even simple things like, no, we shouldn't just start using Notion just because somebody likes the tool. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like
Right.
these little things where like when you have to be a little more guarded with your spending, when it's not just like buy all the SaaS tools you can imagine and hire all the roles you've ever heard of. It's little things like that where leadership, like people can easily sour on like, oh, I can't use the tools that I really want, or, you know, I'm having to do things I don't like to do because we can't afford to hire like a certain specialist role.
And so did you solve this mostly through coaching? What was your approach? What tactical approaches worked?
For me, generally, and I mean, this works for this. This is a there's no panaceas in our world, but this is as close as it gets. Is helping people as a group and also as individuals to see the connection between what we do on a day-to-day basis to the P&L, and more importantly, the connection of the P&L to enterprise value. Like, and
Yeah.
also like what does it mean when we say we're trying to extend the time to have to raise a Series C? Like, what does that mean in real world terms?
Right.
What does a fundraising process even look like?
Right.
How does valuation happen? Why is why is the decision of like, you know, why do we even need to raise funding to begin with? Why can't we just cut deeper and be profitable? You know what I mean? Like,
Right.
what does it mean for our company if we're not profitable? Does that mean we're a bad company? Like all these things are not obvious to people who aren't like living and breathing finance all day long.
I think one of the key things to remember is that whenever one of these possibly stress-inducing moments come, and it could be a downturn, a tightening of the global economy. It could be that there's a potential acquisition that people have gotten wind of, or that the company's thinking about selling. It could be a combination with another company. It could be restructuring. It's like that. There's going to be a lot of people on your team who haven't seen the movie before and are going to be stressed about it. And as a leader, actually just approaching it very calmly and saying, like, this is not a this is not a new thing, right? Like, been through this before. We will get through the other side. Here's what it means, right? Let me explain. But like, so much is actually they're queuing off of. I'm going to make this ridiculous analogy, and I hope people bear with it. But you're a parent, I'm a parent, and when you have a young child. Not that employees are young children, but the dynamic. There's some elements of this dynamic is that they'll stumble and they'll trip and they'll land on the ground and you'll go, ooh. And then what happens next matters a great deal. So if you look concerned, they get up and they go, ah, they start crying. And if you go, ah, wasn't that amazing? They go, yeah, okay, that was really funny. Like you, I assume you've had this experience with your kids, right?
Yeah, no, I mean, and uh treading lightly here on going like belaboring your analogy, but you're absolutely right.
It's a
Like
dangerous one, I suppose.
it definitely is. But yeah, you're absolutely right. How you model your behavior or how the behaviors you model definitely stick on. And also like having a really keen eye on how people's emotions, how people's emotions are doing, because oftentimes all it needs is for like a couple of people to start panicking.
Yep.
Like, oh, we're doing a hiring freeze, or we cut down the hiring on that role, or oh, we're trying to like remove unnecessary SaaS tools. Like, oh my God, sky's falling, we're going out of business.
Yeah.
That can really poison the well. Uh, even in these distributed times when there's less like water cooler chatter, but like you always know, like the DMs in Slack are
Yeah.
going red, and people are talking to each other and kind of over analyzing the situation, or drawing parallels to something they may have lived through that was similar, and it's really important to essentially pinpoint or identify the people who are like spiraling the worst and really invest the
Yeah.
time to kind of help talk them off a ledge. Because it's with your kids it's very direct, it's just you and the kids, and
Hmm.
the kid scrapes the knee and whatever. But with an organization you don't really have like it's like 100 people, it's 200 people, it's 50
Yeah.
people.
Yeah, for sure.
um
And
so
again, to be clear, I'm not saying that employees are children, nor is it a family dynamic, um, but yeah, as I think it's obvious, but the point of the analogy is people are queuing off of your emotions, and for as much as you're going to be stressed, you need to keep that to your private time. And it's not just for
Yep.
the people who report to you. Like I've had multiple situations, and I get this, this just happens as you get older, where you've got a CEO who's younger than you, who's seen less, especially in like scale up modes, right? This is the founder of the company. I haven't been through this before potentially, and like it actually can be, you can play a really important role of actually being a calm force for them as well as your executive peers. It's not just the people that report to you. And so that like keeping that presence, that keeping that presence, I think is really useful. To your point about spotting the people I think who are swirling, it's both like, you know, yes, in your team meetings, you could say, hey, let's talk about this. Like, what are people worried about? Like, let's talk about the elephant in the room. Let's just talk frankly about this. Let's talk about how, there are challenges in this, but you get through it. And but if someone is starting to swirl, sometimes it has to be more than I'm going to coach you through it. Sometimes it has to be actually a warning as well. Like I'm going to be transparent with you. You are causing some issues with the broader team. I need you to I get your stress, but I need you to dial that back a little bit because it's bringing a negativity that's not productive to what we're doing. I had
That's it.
a the head of this guy Ben Schulte at Meetup who ran our AI, and these days it's called AI. It was the data and machine learning team at Meetup. Um, was incredible at keeping his team focused and moving through very confusing and distressing times. And it was lots of different things that popped up, as the WeWork meltdown was happening, but also it was little things like, I remember we had this crazy incident where this DEI consultant came in and was grossly inappropriate in all the wrong ways. It's like, how did you get that job? You were like so not about diversity and inclusion, and it upset a lot of people because that was a topic that Mito cared a great deal about. And he so calmly just got his whole team oriented around like, let's get back to work. Like, the best way for us to solve this is just maintain momentum. He was exceptional at just like saying, yeah, that's distressing, but let's not let that distract us because like it's through our work and through our momentum that we will regain our equilibrium. I always admired that about him.
I mean, I don't know why, if it's my Nordic pessimism, but I immediately went to the negative reverberators. But like you're right, the other really incredibly valuable thing is identifying kind of the positive reverberators, like people
Yep.
who accentuate the positive message, and uh, especially people who are in like key leadership positions, whether under you or not, being able to like really shine the spotlight on them. Because um, can't remember if it's the book Culture Code or what other book about team dynamics that I read it in, but there's there's a lot of power of like the good egg to diffuse. Like it was more around like teamwork in small group settings, and they had done experiments on just how much a bad apple will grind down a group
Mm-hmm.
dynamic. But they had also done like follow-up studies on like how well a kind of good egg can diffuse the like negative impact of a bad apple. And I think that works in a broader context setting as well, where if you have curmudgeons and people who are always like Chicken Little, sky is falling, uh, trying to deputize people who you know have that positive, we can do it, let's
Yep.
keep going impact, has a really strong. And you're right with the it sometimes needs to be more than coaching, especially if it happens on like, you know, product managers, engineering managers,
Mm-hmm.
directors, layers that have a lot of influence, but often have people who are relatively junior to leadership positions and don't necessarily understand. I don't know if this matches your experience, but one of the hallmarks of more junior managers is often this perception that their job is to be like the best friend of their
Yep.
team,
Yep.
and like they think that their job is to represent people that report into them to the company, when in fact the first job is to represent the company towards the direct reports.
Right.
And so I've seen that as like a, and maybe I've even made the mistake in my past of
Mm.
almost becoming like the a source of bad vibes
Yep.
towards the team in challenging times, like, oh my god, the leadership team decided blah blah blah, and oh, we're going straight to hell in a handbasket.
It's easy
uh,
to fall prey to that. Um, you know, you raise up an important point about leadership. Like leadership in terms of state of mind is about trying to raise the people around you through authenticity, right? You can't be fake. People see right through that. But raising the people around you. And when I'm looking to promote people into leadership roles, I'm looking to see that they're already doing it. You can't wait until someone gets the title to do it. They're already doing it. And it's something to practice. Like if you want to become a leader, uh, you could start doing that at any point in time. You don't have to be senior in your team to be lifting the people around you.
yeah.
Yeah.
um did you have any good anecdote brewing in your mind about leadership through tough times?
Well, the just the reference to Ben and watching him work and admiring how he, when other teams were in chaos, emotional chaos, how he did such a great job of just being really grounded and reorienting everyone around what really mattered. Not dismissing their concerns. He never did it by saying what you're feeling and what people are feeling is unimportant. He just reminded everyone, like, hey, we're here for a reason, like, and we will feel better if we just stay productive and get back to the mission and build momentum. And I thought he did that really elegantly. And so that was I think the key story that I wanted to share, is that, yeah, there's a silver lining to, of course, to these moments, which is that hiring gets a lot easier, and you can you can bring some incredible talent into your organization, when these moments happen.
It's yeah, you almost feel guilty about about that, and I especially hiring in like 22 and 23, when I've been hiring people to like engineering and product and design positions for quite a long time, and it's always been a seller's market, right? Like it's always hiring tech talent has always been like you try your darndest, but you ultimately hire what you can get.
Yeah.
And it's almost like biased me in my head as a person hiring that like I almost like I owe the market something. Whereas like in 22, 23, it was the first time I felt this like weird surge of power. It's like, oh my God, these people need me more than I need them. And I felt so guilty and ashamed.
Mm.
But then the way I was able to sleep at night, it was more like, okay, if in like what's probably going to be like a 30, 40, whatever year career, if there's like a couple of years where I get to enjoy my pick of the litter and have that power, maybe it's not the end of the world. But yeah, it was a wild ride being able to like uh basically just close your eyes and picture the perfect candidate and then just go get it.
I think it's wise as a leader to realize the moments of opportunity in these downturns. You know, I'm now old enough that I've been through multiple of them. And it can actually be an amazing time, certainly to start a company, because while everyone else is swirling and struggling and sort of on hold, it gives you some time to get your legs under you and build up. But I think as a growth stage company as well, yes, you will slow down. Yes, there's going to be things that are less pleasant to deal with, but there's opportunity as well to sort of say, okay, well, let's take this moment to consolidate our strength, to remember what we're about, to focus on what we're about, right? When you're just like chasing growth because you know the cookie jar is getting passed, so you grab it. You can't let these opportunities pass you by. But there is this very powerful moment, I think, to actually say, let's refocus. Let's on the quality of team we have, on the focus of our product efforts, on what our strategy should be, and if you can, and how we get through this, because like we want to be poised when things turn up again, when customers are buying again. We want to be like ready to pounce. That's and like so if you go into it sort of smelling that opportunity rather than like just reacting, but thinking about that opportunity, I think strategically you could set your company up really well.
It's also like a really nice trial by fire. Like when you go through, especially temporary periods of scarcity, it really separates the wheat from the chaff in terms of like who are people who know how to like really come out the gate swinging when it's go time versus those that can just like keep up appearances of being a good employee. Because I mean, especially for managers, nothing's easier than being a great manager when the sun is shining. You know,
Mhm.
when you only get to do the fun parts of the job, you coach and you lead and da 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 da. But then when the rain clouds gather, that's when you can really tell who can really rise above. And that is painful as it may be. That's the nice thing about times of scarcity is you probably come out of it with an incredibly tight team that can execute like crazy.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. What's funny about like where you started off, you were talking about the funding markets. I went to a talk by a very well respected venture capitalist, very successful and well respected and thoughtful VC the other day. And they were talking about how, you know, we all know about the power curve, right? That VCs have, where, you know, one or two of the investments they make the entire fund. Um, but it's also timing. I think people talk about this a little bit less. Timing really matters. And they were talking about how of their successful funds, like the vast majority, and partially this is of course tied to one company going out, but it was more than that. It was like they made the vast majority of their returns in these very small windows of time when the markets actually got frothy. And to do that, to take advantage of that, you need to have companies that are poised and ready to either go public or be bought. And so
Yeah.
the notion that you're going to sort of like shut everything down actually and stop in a downturn is in some ways, you know, seems maybe a little counterintuitive, because you need to have these portfolio companies that are ready to go when it starts to reemerge. Like that's not the time to start investing again, because you know, it's going to take some period of time after your investments for a company to be ready.
Yeah.
And I think the really savvy investors often know that, but I think they're human just like the rest of us. And when everything tightens up, it's super easy for everyone to tighten up. Um,
Yeah.
you know, but that's also where then the smart ones are like, well, okay, I have powder to put to work. but now I can do it on better terms, of course. And that's when the tough rounds start happening. But
Yeah. I mean the timing component. I know we've gone pretty long already, but I'll sneak a real quick anecdote in. The timing component was very top of mind when I was leading product at Teachable,
yeah,
and this little semi unexpected thing called the global pandemic hit, which was um, it was this wild gold rush for companies in our space because everybody in the world was trying to digitize their business. And we, of course, were a commerce platform for people trying to sell digital courses and coaching. And so looking back at decisions that we made and other companies in our space made, it's like obviously nobody predicted what was happening. Like nobody could have predicted. But to your point, some companies were better poised to seize the opportunity
mm-hmm.
versus those that scrambled. And it was almost like weeks mattered, days mattered. How fast can you really swing and like capture this new emerging wild demand?
Right.
And then like how hard do you go? Because nobody knew how long this gold rush would last. And it was funny because looking back at it now, I think we self-flagellated quite a bit at Teachable that we weren't as fast as some others to like really ramp up on sales and marketing, really ramp up on growth tactics. But then I look at some of the other competitors in the space that I've seen numbers for, not naming any names, who went like 150% of revenue on sales and marketing, meaning like aggressive, like
Yeah.
land grab. But then when the fall off happened and the market to be captured wasn't there anymore, that headcount and that labor cost is not going anywhere because nobody's going to like just like fire everybody overnight.
Yep.
And so some companies really put themselves in a bad position by like overcharging the opportunity. And it's that like it's one thing to lead in headwinds, right? Like when you know you're in a bad spot and it's going to take a year, 2 years, 3 years to survive. But when you don't know which way the wind is blowing, like the pandemic in one way it was crazy headwind, everything shutting down, stock market crashing for a moment, da 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 da. But at the same time, your cash register is just ringing like crazy. So that was a fun experience, like having your hand on the throttle and being like, do I press all the way and hire
Mm-hmm.
anybody with a pulse, or do I play it kind of safe? Or
Mm-hmm. Those are
funny,
big decisions.
funny times, funny times.
All right, well, let's wrap. Let's wrap.
Yep, let's do it.
Thanks for a good session, Tommy.